High school can be tough. We'll help you navigate some of the areas you need help with, including the college preparation process, by providing advice for families. Every student is different and has a unique path. That's why we created this podcast. Our innovative and intentional approach builds confidence in the individual student. Listen each week to find out how students can score better on college placement tests with techniques and methods that build confidence, beat test anxiety, and identify strengths within each student. You're listening to Simply Smarter with hosts Caleb and Jill. Check out our blog at GetSmarterPrep.com for more college prep-related topics.
Every student's junior year is pretty hectic. That's why in today's episode, we are going to talk about why choosing the correct ACT test date is so important. I'm your host, Jill Purcell, and the guy sitting across the table from me is the president of Get Smarter Prep, Caleb Pierce.
Hey, Jill. How are you today?
I'm good, Caleb. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's definitely feeling like hump day.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Man, I woke up this morning really hoping it was Friday. It is not.
No, I'm sorry. It's
That's
not.
Okay.
But you're halfway through the week, so that's good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was front loaded this week.
Oh.
My Monday and Tuesday were nuts.
Yes.
And now, just cruise. I can make it now.
Yeah.
I can make it.
Well, we had the April 2nd ACT
that was huge.
Test date for all Kansas.
And of course, that was deferred from February 20th.
Yes.
Which was not a fun experience for students and families.
No.
Or trying to balance and figure out what that looked like for them.
Right.
Because we wanted to continue to help them, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. Darn snow day.
Dang it.
Come on. And then now there's the April 13th test date that is quickly approaching.
10 days away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a large number of students working for that too, and then right into June.
Man, that's going to come up fast. It really doesn't, which is good. That's why we're here. Well, we wanted to talk about why choosing the correct test date is so important. We're going to kind of go over 4 or 5 different pieces that we feel are some good points to go over so you can choose that right test date.
Yeah, sometimes I think families... Again, we make so many things so complicated, right? But we try to make this thing a little bit too simplified and just kind of try to force things sometimes. So we really want to drive home the idea that, hey, let's find something that makes sense for your student and not overwhelm them more than we have to.
More than
right?
we have to.
Junior year's already crazy. We get it.
Not for today's juniors.
Yeah. Oh
my goodness. They have so much going on, right?
I don't know where they fit their sleep in. And when I talk to my students, it actually is kind of surprising because some of them only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night.
No, I need a solid 8. Solid 8.
I'm there at that 8.5. I'm rolling with that right now.
Yeah, it's a good thing my kids slept through the night early on because woofda.
So true.
Coffee.
So one of the things that I want to make sure that we're focused on as we kind of think through this process of when to choose a test date, and every student is going to be a little bit different, of course, and we'll get into some of those details.
Right.
But one of the big things to keep in mind is the test date itself shouldn't be the focus. It's the time frame leading up to it. Like, what does that prep time look like? Some families are out there as 6th and 7th graders, and they're straight up preparing for the ACT. Like, way too far ahead, in my opinion.
Way too early.
I think of just 2 or 3 years ago when the SAT completely changed. There were kids who had been preparing for the SAT for 3 years or 4 years, and what a waste, because it was totally worthless because the test completely changed, right?
Yeah.
So we generally kind of want to start about 8 to 10 weeks before a test date.
Okay.
And we'll plan out what that actually looks like for each student, right? So I get a lot of pushback, and we'll get into some of the actual test dates in a little bit, but there's 7 national test dates each year. And then there's also the state assessment, which they just added here in Kansas this last year. And that's for public school students throughout the entire state.
Yeah, which is great because then they don't have to pay for that test.
Yeah. Joe, taxpayer pays for it.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah,
but that's available to them.
Absolutely.
Does every state do that?
Anybody and everybody. Not every state. Missouri actually did it for maybe 2 years, and they just discontinued it this year.
Oh, why?
So
you know why?
I think just cost, budget concerns. So some districts still do it. So actually there were a number of Missouri schools that their district actually administered the test on April 2nd as well. So
good.
So the thing to keep in mind is that don't fixate on the test date. So, for instance, I happen to like the December test a lot, which we'll get into down the road, right? I just like that for students. I think the flow of the semester and whatnot, and we'll get into it. But some people are like, oh man, that's right before finals. Well, the preparation is in October and November. So you're finished with the ACT. You have zero stress from the ACT left when you can actually now prepare for your finals.
Focus on your finals.
Do really well on those.
Yeah, okay, good point.
So I want to make sure that we're kind of focused on that piece right now.
So it starts usually 8 to 10 weeks out. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to think backwards as far as dates sometimes, but say the June test coming up, that's going to start here for our courses in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I had some private students, we're 10 weeks out right now, because I had some students that I've started with for the June test right now, and then our classes begin in about a week and a half or so.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, you really do have to prepare, look at your schedule and see, what's going to fit into your own specific schedule.
Absolutely. And then there are two things that we recommend focusing in on and trying to figure out what test date makes sense, right? And we'll get into this in the details, but the two basics are the academics, like where are you in your curriculum, particularly with regard to math. And the second piece is going to be, hey, what else do you have going on in your life? So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, what classes are you taking? Are you taking AP classes? Are they, if you're taking 4 AP classes a semester, that's a heavy load.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
So
And when do those tests happen? They happen in May, right? So we want to definitely avoid that June test, because you're going to not only have finals week, but you're going to have 2 other weeks of testing going on where you're going to have to really be focused.
Right.
So either focus on that April test or some other test during that school year that makes sense for you. But don't force it.
No.
I mean, that'd be brutal.
No.
That'd be a brutal May for you leading up to that June ACT.
And also, think about what you have taken already or you're about to take. So if you haven't taken Algebra 2, which there is a lot of Algebra 2 on the ACT, maybe wait until you've taken that to even start thinking about preparing for the ACT, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of our big drivers around here, is making sure that students are going to be set up for success, right? So a lot of juniors will be taking Algebra 2 during that year. And if you're in that category, definitely don't focus on a test date in the summer before junior year or in the fall of junior year. In fact, we actually recommend not even coming in for a practice test, establishing that baseline until November, December, January timeframe, just because you'll have a full semester of Algebra 2 under your belt. And that is a big portion of the exam.
Yeah, set up for success, not
That's
failure.
Right.
Yeah. What about geometry, biology, chemistry?
So we all know that there's a science section.
That was a heavy sigh.
It was a heavy sigh. I have a love-hate relationship with that science section, right?
You're right.
Like most people don't realize it, but I have an undergrad degree in chemistry.
Super smart.
Super weird, right? Don't use it one bit anymore, of course. But with it, we see the science section, we get psyched out. It's all about science, right? Except for it's not.
But it's not.
There is zero science really on the ACT.
So frustrating.
I know.
How do you prepare
it's so
for
tricky,
that?
Right?
Yes.
It's about just learning how to approach that section, what they're really testing, and really focusing on the details along the way. And this takes me back to something that we talked about in a previous podcast. The test, the ACT, is not what students are learning in school. That'd be kind of strange, because colleges already know what that looks like. They're receiving their transcripts, right?
Plus, everyone would do really well on the test.
Right, clearly, right? So we have to adjust to what they're testing, and it's just strange and weird and kind of uncomfortable. But if we approach it in the right way, it just alleviates all those stressors, and sometimes we can see some really solid improvements in that science section without even knowing any science, right? The goal isn't to become a physicist in 5 minutes with a physics passage. That would be impossible.
That would be cool, though.
That would be cool. We want to make sure that we're getting the questions correct, and that's kind of what we'll help students focus on.
Yeah. Awesome. So make sure you're not already packed with your schedule. Make sure it makes sense for what you've already learned or what you're going to learn. I like those little tips.
Absolutely.
I like those a lot.
So then the other piece is what else do you have going on in your life? So if you, again, just to reiterate, if you're in Algebra 2 as a sophomore, hey, guess what? You have 7 test dates during junior year that we would recommend you focus in on. Find one that makes sense, move in that direction, right? If you were taking Algebra 2 as a as a junior.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Junior.
As a junior, then we would recommend waiting until second semester of junior year to go ahead and focus on a test date during that time frame.
Yep. And how many do they have? They'd
still have February and April and June and July, all before senior year even begins.
Yep. Okay. And that's kind of nice to get out of the way as well. So
sometimes it's tough to know what college what your college list should look like if you don't have a good score and know how you're doing. Because if you have, we talked about some of our schools last week, right? So if you have a 22, maybe TCU is going to be a huge stretch for you.
Yep.
Whereas again, getting into KU is probably pretty realistic, right?
Yep.
But we just don't know what that looks like until we have the actual scores on hand. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? What about sports? So if you're in sports, it's kind of the same as a heavy load. You know, you're going to have lots of practices, lots of games. You know, do you really want to focus on the ACT when you're in the middle of a season?
Yeah. It depends on the student and the sport, because sometimes students are 3-sport athletes and they literally don't have a downtime.
True.
Or they're hardcore. And I've known some students who are swimmers and divers that are just year-round, nonstop. And maybe club season is maybe a little less crazy than school season. Maybe you only have practice 3 days a week instead of 6 days a week.
Wow,
right?
serious.
So maybe we just kind of reevaluate on that front and kind of, again, pick the best of the worst kind of idea.
True.
Kind of takes us back to particularly the reading section of the ACT, right? The best of the worst.
What about, I mean, I know you played baseball.
Yeah.
And football.
I did way back in the day.
Oh, man.
Couldn't tell it now, but that's cool. Yeah, so again, when I look back, I was part of that old school where you took it kind of one time and you were done, and I waited until senior year. Now, a lot of families don't realize, but the October ACT is the most taken exam nationwide, and it's because primarily that's when seniors are taking it. That's a little later than we would recommend if we have some planning and the curriculum is there and all that. So we just want to do what's best for the student, and that's where we kind of target that. And I would have had a tough time balancing it with all my extracurricular activities back in the day.
Right. Yeah, there's so much going on.
But it's just a little bit different game these days.
Right. You know, I was in volleyball.
You were.
And then I got cut. That's when I was a sophomore. I really wasn't good, but I dreamt.
I could see you dominating the courts.
Oh, yeah. You know.
You guys should have seen that look she just gave me.
Oh, boy. Okay, so in college, though, I was an intramural volleyball champion.
That sounds right.
I know. I was with my, well, I don't even know if we were engaged at the time, boyfriend / fiance.
All right.
And his friend, and the friend was 6'9". So
that doesn't hurt.
Stack your team a little bit. You know what I mean?
I like it.
Okay,
that's
moving
awesome.
on. What about extracurricular activities? So we talked about sports and academics. Find what fits for you, but there's so many extracurricular activities for high schoolers nowadays.
Clubs or leadership, or and again, these are things we encourage our students to be a part of.
Right, musicals,
band. I mean, I was in everything. So I had marching band going on.
It's called being well-rounded, Caleb.
I was in the musicals and the pit. So I always had something going on, and I know students are kind of that same way these days. So we just want to, again, try to avoid those times where we're just going to put an undue burden and something's going to suffer because your students are just too busy. And it could be sports, it could be academics, it could be the test, and maybe they're just not focusing on what they need to do to get the score that they need or want.
So I have a question. Do you, in your opinion, do you think students should maybe not go out for this club or not be a part of the spring musical because they're maybe wanting to take the April test? Or
I would personally work around the things that you're passionate about, right? The ACT is important, don't get me wrong, but I also think students need to find their passions and things that they love and actually be involved with those. Right. So I would find a test date that works or generally works and go from there.
Right. You know what's coming up? Prom.
Oh, it is.
This weekend? This weekend?
Yeah, a lot of my students are taking it or have it this weekend.
Did you go?
Oh, I did. I went twice back in the day.
Yeah,
Junior year, senior year, right?
Senior, yeah.
My senior year, I was in charge of prom because I was senior class president.
Oh, man.
And we had it at the National History Museum in downtown Denver. It was beautiful.
Yeah,
it was really
that'd
cool.
Be awesome. That would be really cool. Yeah, I went. I went 3 times. I was invited as a sophomore to like a smaller school.
You were way cooler than me.
No, I wasn't. And then junior and senior. It was fun. I always had a good time. Okay, so this is something that we did that was a little bit different than most schools, I think. To me, it was normal, but then when I started talking, just to different friends in college and outside of, growing up here and whatever, they were like, what? I've never heard of that before. But we had a grand march.
A grand march?
Is it like a smaller school?
So like going into the venue, like the gym or wherever it is? Like,
yeah, we had like this,
and everybody's taking pictures and...
Yeah, you'd go on the stage and the stage was all decorated and you'd walk down with your date and they would announce you.
I've heard of this.
It was embarrassing to me because everyone was, everyone's looking at the couple walking down the stage. And then you just hope that you would get, like a good song to walk down to.
Right, yeah. Oh.
And if you got a crappy song,
do you remember any of the songs?
Man, darn it.
Little Mariah Carey?
Oh, that would be a good one.
That would have been solid.
I feel like Gavin DeGraw would have been really good to walk down to.
Okay. Man, we're dating ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah. But, anyway, so those extracurricular activities. What about talk about deadlines for scholarships, for college admittance?
Absolutely. So
talk about those a little bit.
So some students really do feel like they're way behind the 8 ball if they haven't taken a test by the end of, let's say, fall of junior year, right?
Okay.
You still have so much time.
Yeah.
College applications don't even come open until, at the earliest, is usually August 1st.
Okay.
Right? So you can't even do anything with your score until that date. Mm-hmm. So even if you wait until the July exam, you're going to have your score back before August 1st.
Yep.
In which case, you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Even from the earliest option of even applying.
Yeah.
Now, deadlines don't even actually start beginning until the earliest I've ever seen are kind of that October 15th.
Okay.
And November 1st and November 15th are very typical deadlines for early action and early decision.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. What is the difference between early action and early decision?
So early action is not binding, right? So depends on the school, but usually you apply early action to just one school. But if you get accepted to that school, you don't legally have to go there. Early decision is kind of hardcore. A lot of schools have moved away from early decision, but you apply early decision and you're kind of bound to it.
You have to go there.
If you get in, you're bound to it.
Right, right. So if you apply for 5 different schools, but one of them is an early decision, you basically have to go there.
Yeah.
So do students apply for 5 schools if they apply to one that is early decision? I mean, would that make sense?
Yeah, it still makes some sense because if you don't get into the school that's early decision, and usually when students are applying to schools that are ED, they're usually pretty highly selective. So a lot of people don't get into them. So you're really trying to set yourself up. Acceptance rates are usually a little higher for early decision than regular decision in January. There's some pros and cons there. Maybe a little bit less scholarship money if that's some concern.
Yes.
They usually offer less money for ED or EA students. So be aware of that. But again, coming back to our hometown here at KC, like there aren't any schools right in our immediate area that have early action or early decision requirements, right? Okay. So there are some scholarship deadlines. So like KU, their deadline is December 15th, or at least it was this year. And so for students, that means if you take the December test, you're not going to get your scores back in time for that. So you need to be completely done by October of senior year.
That would be the final ACT
ideally
test
during junior year, like we talked about, right? But that October test date would be your deadline.
Yeah, because we got to get those scholarships in there. So what about, let's talk about a super score. There's so many S's in that word.
That's a tough one.
It's a tricky one on this hump
should
day.
Be a GRE word. So, yeah, super score is something that a lot of families either know a lot about or they know nothing about, right? There's like no middle ground in that one.
Right.
So super scoring is when a student takes the test more than one time and they will take the best of each sub-score. So maybe the English and reading are higher on one test, and then the student decides, I want to take it again. I think I can improve in these other sections, and then you really jump on that math and science, and those scores go higher than they were before, but maybe that English drops a little bit. That doesn't matter, because some schools will super score, and they'll take those best subsections.
It kind of feels like cheating.
It kind of does. to be honest, coming from an enrollment background, I have no idea why every college doesn't just do super scoring, right? When you're comparing two schools and one super scores and one does not, the average scores are clearly just going to be higher because of that extra bonus piece, right?
Right.
So be cautious when you're looking at schools and you're looking at those rankings, because sometimes you're not really comparing apples to apples in there.
But not every college super scores. So let's
correct.
take a look at some of the ones that do there. And they are more selective schools.
Oftentimes. So I think the most curious case and that I've come across is the University of Arkansas, right? So everybody thinks that they know best, and this is a good example. So for college admission, University of Arkansas will not super score your ACT, but the financial aid office will super score your ACT.
What?
So even within the same institution, they're using two different policies in how they're looking at ACT scores. And you'll see that as you're looking at 10 different schools, they may have 10 slightly different ways of approaching your application process and even looking at your ACT scores. So some of the other really popular ones that we're hearing a lot these days, not too far away, very selective school over in St. Louis, Washington University, or WashU. They super score. TCU, SMU, they super score the ACT.
Duke, Boston College.
Yeah, exactly.
Some good ones.
Yeah. So if they may not have the term super score on the website, on the college website, but feel free to reach out to their college admissions professionals or kind of look at their policy, and maybe they outline it and use different wording.
What else would they say?
They'll say something about like combining sub scores or combining multiple test dates or something like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But just double check.
Yeah, double check. Don't ever assume that colleges will super score.
Right.
Yeah, that's not a safe assumption.
So it's to the advantage of the student, say, go back to the University of Arkansas, to accept one ACT score for admissions, and then for scholarships accept a super score.
Yeah, for scholarship reasons, yeah. So a student could literally have a 21 or 22 as a high score, but they could get a 24 super score depending on what those sub-scores look like.
And then get to that higher bracket.
And then you get that additional scholarship money, right? You get 70% off out-of-state tuition.
Yeah, I don't hate that.
I love it. Not the worst.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for the student. I like it.
So what else? What else do we have today?
So we've covered academics, sports, extracurricular activities. Make sure your deadlines and your scholarships are going to align with the test date as well. And really just kind of, take a look at your junior year, senior year. Maybe start at the end of your sophomore year, and kind of just look at the year, look out and see what you're going to have, what you're going to be involved in, and then kind of plan it out before then. Usually 8 to 10 weeks for ACT prep.
Absolutely, and we'll help kind of guide a family. Each individual family is going to be different, so we want to kind of help them figure out what that particular test date looks like for their particular situation. I also want to throw out, and I don't think I said this earlier, stop me if I did.
I will.
Thank you. So we actually recommend that students take the test one time and be done with it, right? Like, why drag this out over months and months and months?
You don't want to study for 6 months for one test?
Yuck. So I know I'm not supposed to be saying that.
Ew, yucky.
Hey, we want people to come in 100 times, right? No, we genuinely want what's best for the student. So try to put your best foot forward whenever you take an actual official test, and just be done with it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, the thing that's challenging is that students will see an improvement, and they'll be like, oh, my goal score just changed, right? And the goalposts sometimes move. So we have to be cautious on that too, because again, if you start burning yourself out and you're going for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months with the ACT, like some families kind of do, it usually doesn't turn out very well. Okay, so statistics show that students who take it more than 3 times typically either hit a plateau or they start declining in their scores. So that's not cool at all.
And again, come in and take a practice test through Get Smarter Prep every Saturday at both locations.
Correct.
We can, it's just beneficial in so many ways, right, Caleb?
Absolutely. It just allows us so many more opportunities. Make sure that we're building out a plan that makes sense for the student.
Yeah, and you can sign up online at GetSmarterPrep.com.
Very good.
Great. Well, I think this kind of wraps it up for our third podcast, right?
Number 3. We're on a roll.
Lucky number 3. I love it. Thanks for listening to the Simply Smarter podcast with Caleb and Jill. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our blog at GetSmarterPrep.com or subscribe to the podcast to hear us talk about all things ACT related. Join us next week as we break down all 4 sections of the ACT and compare those to the SAT test.